earned her bachelor's degree in English communication from Emmanuel College and her Master of Arts in English from Middlebury College's Breadloaf School of English. She is a passionate advocate for the practice of culturally sustaining pedagogical approach in education and has been working in the field of education since 2001. Lorena has held educational leadership positions at the department level, school-wide level, and the district level in everything from curriculum design to strategizing for improvement. She's the chair of the National Council of English Teachers Committee Against Racism and Bias in the Teaching of English, and she's a co-founder of #DisruptText. She's also co-founder of the Multicultural Classroom, through which she supports teachers and schools in developing anti-racist and culturally sustaining pedagogy. Lorena, thank you so much for leading us through this critical session on supporting social emotional learning through anti-racist teaching. Take it away.
All right, thank you for that. What a long intro. I mean, in other words, I'm just like, I'm busy, like always doing something. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm really looking forward to our time. Not because this is a lighthearted topic, because it is not. It's actually quite heavy and challenging, but I'm hopeful and I feel positive that out of this will come some good practices in our classroom. So that's why I feel positive about our session together. Rashi, go for it. Click. So one of the things I want to do is actually to pause for a second and breathe. We're all excited. I'm giddy, especially after that song. So I want to center myself and calm down. So I want to invite you to do that with me. And it's a very simple practice. Anybody who does any kind of mindfulness, then you know how to do this. So if you would like to, you can sit up nice and straight, or maybe, put your feet flat on the floor. Maybe you want to put your hands on your lap. You can close your eyes or just focus your gaze on something. And we're just going to take 3 deep breaths together. That's all we're going to do, just to calm down and get our minds and bodies ready to receive and learn and to process a lot of information. So we'll take a really deep breath and then exhale on a slow 3 count. And I'll lead us through that. Deep breath. 1, 2, 3. We'll do that one more time, and we're just going to hold our deep breath. 1, 2, 3. Last time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for letting me have that moment, okay? And sometimes I get into it and I roll my neck a little bit just to get ready. So we're gonna get started. So some of you are going to probably wanna take some notes. So have that, available, whatever that means. If you're taking notes on your phone or on a notepad, that's cool. And then some quick norms for our time together. First, please cite me and don't share this content without my consent. It is my intellectual property, and I spent a lot of time crafting and organizing this. There will be moments where I offer you opportunities to take a screenshot, so feel free to do that. But outside of that, please, just cite me if you're gonna go on Instagram or social media anywhere to talk about elements of this session, okay? And then last but not least, an open mind is gonna be really important. I think that there's a lot of times where we have conversations about social emotional learning and they sound a certain way. And so today, we're actually going to integrate a lot of different ideas to develop a broader and I think more holistic understanding of SEL. So without further ado, we're going to jump in. So have an open mind as we do that, okay? Click. There you go. All right. So we're going to start with some frameworks, with some theory that's going to inform our practice. This is not centered simply in our feelings or opinions, even though both are very important, but I think it's critical, particularly for folks who are going to resist our ideas and the things that we're going to want to do in our classrooms and schools, right? So it's important to offer them research-based content for our practices, and then also for ourselves, so that we know, right, like that it's not just my instinct, that it's not just me being a good human, but that actually this is stuff that has been researched and proven to come together and be in relationship. So we're going to talk about 4 frameworks. Tolerance domains, which I hope many of you know and are familiar with. We're going to talk a little bit about critical race theory, a little bit about traits of white supremacy culture, and then a little bit about culturally sustaining pedagogy. Now, if you know about any of these things, then you know that it's a lot. So this is going to be very much a surface level conversation to just pull from them to build our framework, okay? I invite you to dig deep. The first 3 of those 4 are available online for free. You can find all of the teaching tolerance domains on the Teaching Tolerance website. Critical race theory information, you can find tons of it online. There's a PDF of the book online. And the traits of what of white supremacy culture is available online too. The last one is a book that is not available for free. But yeah, so just so you know, even though we're going to just kind of walk through it briefly, resources are available for you, okay? All right, cool. Yes. So briefly, the 4 domains of teaching tolerance are based on the work of Louise Derman Sparks. But what we're going to look at is these 4 areas of learning, essentially, which is how they framed it, okay? So the 4 domains of teaching tolerance include identity, work around justice, work around diversity, and work around action. And what this means is that work that's, the content that we create, conversations that we, make space for in our classrooms that are focused on identity, according to the teaching tolerance framework, are focused on the self, others, and intersectionality. So they break identity down basically in those ways. Who are you? Who are the people around you? And what makes our characters unique and complex? Their domain of justice talks about focusing on identifying, right, helping young people to see the social structures that are in place in our society that lead to injustice. So work around and for justice in our classrooms should be doing this, okay? Work around diversity in our classrooms should be focused on difference, in celebration and observation as a normal thing, context, and interacting with others, okay? So who are these people, and what does it matter that these people are gathered in this space at this time? And then action, that domain encourages civic engagement and advocacy, all right? And I think that this is a good way for us to frame our work, because we can understand identity and diversity, but the minute we talk about justice and young people start to learn and understand the ways that there's so much injustice, they want to do something about it, right? And so that action piece is important to offer them an outlet for, expressing their desires for justice, for fairness, for, all the names that we want to call that. So those are those 4 domains, and we're going to build on them by thinking about critical race theory. So originally developed, well, there's been a lot of layers and people who have added and who have continued to build on this. Like, for example, Kimberly Crenshaw, who talks about intersectionality, like that's part of critical race theory now. This is kind of the earlier tenets, or let's call them pillars of critical race theory. So the first is that, a teacher that is doing anti-racist work is thinking critically about race by offering counter storytelling, by offering the idea or the understanding that racism is embedded in the structure of this US society, that racism has a material foundation. It's not simply feelings, and it is tied to money and finances and material. Racism changes and develops over time, that just because we don't have chattel slavery right now, right, that style of slavery, that racism still exists. It has simply evolved. Racism is often ascribed a degree of rationality, like, for example, Tom Cotton saying, his rationale for why we should not be teaching 1619, and the what was it, the necessity of evil of slavery, right? Saying that, like, what was it, what do they call it, an evil necessity, something along those lines, right? So there's this rationale around, like, well, you know, without us pillaging and murdering and enslaving people, we wouldn't have all these great things. And it's like, well, yeah, then I'd rather give up these great things so we can go back and do right. And then that racism also has a contemporary bias, that it exists today and that it functions in our society, okay? This alone is a year-long course. So I just want you to understand that we are skipping through a pond right now, okay? Skipping through this as if, you know, this is not a lake. So when you think about those 4 domains and critical race theory, we're gonna actually build all of this together. You'll see when we get there, okay? Next. Then we get to the traits of white supremacy culture. This was developed by a woman named Tema Okun, a white woman, actually. I think one of the things that I like, there's a lot of things that I like about her work, but I think that it's powerful that as an insider into whiteness, as a white woman, she can really name and itemize this culture. There are 12 traits, according to her research with Kenneth Jones and the work of many other people of color as well, that she has built on. So the 12 traits are perfectionism, a sense of urgency, defensiveness, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism, progress is bigger and more, objectivity, and right to comfort. So I'm going to stop for a moment. These 12 traits, if we're looking at them individually, they might not seem racialized. When I first read of this work, I actually felt some resistance to it. Like, what? Why? How is this? You know, this is trash. And it's clearly like just my own resistance to having to unpack some of that for myself. But I think that what I've come to understand is that culture often feels like this invisible, you know, air that we all breathe, or the juice we've all drunk and nobody asked us for it. It was just on the table, right? And so it's hard to pinpoint. But then I started thinking, okay, well, if this isn't white, then prove it to me, right? And so I started thinking, and you know, one of the places that I go to in my mind and in my work often is Dominican Republic, which is where I'm from. And so I said, okay, well then what are the traits of Dominican culture? And so I went through and I was like, actually, yeah, we don't really value a lot of these, as a matter of fact. For example, we're not an individualistic society at all. We're very much a collective one. We're focused on family and like, where is your crew? You know, people, you know, even the concept of like college is over now, you go live alone. Like that's not really a thing. You really don't even leave home when you're in college, you get driven. So there's certainly not a worship of the written word in the sense of valuing that over all other forms of communication. Defensiveness is not really a thing. Sense of urgency is out the window. We're on an island, okay? If somebody invites you to their house at 4 p.m., just aim to be there around 6 and you're on time, okay? So these traits are very much American, particular to this continent and this culture, and still what makes them white? And so then I was like, okay, well, what about, you know, African Americans who have been here from forever, right? Not the beginning, because obviously they were brought here, but they've been here forever. Their culture is also very different. So this isn't necessarily, you know, American culture. This is very much white American culture. And then we can understand that it's supremacist because it is valued above the rest. And then you are, you know, I'll call it vilified when you don't meet these social and cultural expectations. So a student, for example, who, let's say, does not have a fear of open conflict, and it's okay with challenging and asking questions, and is okay with confrontation because they're confident in who they are, well, sometimes they're seen as defiant. And so now you're deviating from this culture and now you're in trouble. And so it's supremacist in the way that, you know, this culture imposes itself and is imposed by others on us who don't fit. And there are always exceptions to all of the rules. So, this is not necessarily, I'm not trying to say all white people. And it's important to understand that collective experience, right? Many people of color in this country see this. We see it. One of the, for anybody who's here who has the workbook that I wrote, you'll see how I made direct connections to early US colonizers. And so these were the folks who came here to this land to, with a sense of urgency, who wanted quantity over quality, who were very paternalistic, either or, because it's mine or yours, and that's it, to power hoard and take land, who very much came on the offense because of fear of open conflict, and yet were actually very violent, right? And it was very much individualistic. I mean, that is at the heart of the American dream. Go get yours, pull yourself up, right? And being objective continues to be valued in the sense that, like, no, my feelings are not involved. These are the facts and statistics, right? And that's supposedly how they operated. And it was very much about their right to comfort. So laws, treaties, all the types of things that were passed to steal land from indigenous people was for the right of comfort for these settlers. Okay, so we see that then, and we have to develop a critical and analytical eye. But at this point, I think it's very obvious we can see it here in our society today. One of the easiest examples for me to cite is gentrification, right? We see the way that it's still about land, it's still materialistic, and gentrification is still at the expense of all of us, people of color, okay? So these traits of white supremacy culture are obviously also going to be embedded in our schools and in every facet, like literally every fiber of what we call schooling, okay? All right, I'm gonna stop here for a second. Next. Okay, so we're gonna pause for a moment. We're gonna reflect for a second, and I'm gonna offer you a chance to answer some of these questions. And you can do that just by thinking, or maybe in your notes you wanna journal, but I'm gonna give us about 3 minutes where I'll be quiet and I'll give you a chance to reflect, okay? So what has been new for you so far? What new ideas have that you're still curious about? And what feelings are coming up for you and why? So I'm gonna time us starting right now. All right, 30 seconds left. Okay. There's so much going on in that chat. That's so good. But hopefully you'll hold some of these ideas and questions for the end, okay? All right, Rashi. So we'll continue. So next is culturally sustaining pedagogy. And I want to clarify that this is a stance. Many have heard of culturally relevant teaching or pedagogy, or culturally responsive. And so culturally sustaining is a build up of that. With their support, with Gloria Ladson Billings, she's on board. Okay, so this is not necessarily a problematic new thing. This is Dr. Paris and Dr. Alim saying it was so important to do that. And now, in addition to being relevant to and being responsive to, actually we need to go beyond and sustain these lifeways. So this is a stance. If you were to get this book and you have not read it, I think it's worth it. It has transformed me as an educator in understanding how I walk into a room, how I should approach planning, relationship, all the things, so that before I get to content and what book I'm going to teach, I need to know how I'm going to teach that book, why I'm going to teach that book, why here, why now, and why these young people, right? So this stance, and this is a very this is a very reduced version, right? So this is a whole book that I have condensed to a sentence for us, okay? Essentially, CSP seeks to sustain languages, literacies, and cultural pluralism. 3 different things. Languages is one, literacies is another, and cultural, in general, pluralism, if thinking about those traits of white supremacy culture, right? All cultures, like we can welcome all of these different cultures as part of schooling with a big goal in mind: positive social transformation, which is where social justice comes in. It is one way to, so social justice, right? To bring about justice at the societal social level. And so CSP, or culturally sustaining pedagogy, is going to help you to develop, like that approach to your classroom and to your pedagogy, okay? So when we think about all of these, and they're actually gonna lead us into SEL learning. I saw a number of the answers at the beginning, and so many of those, I didn't see all of them, but so many of them are spot on. You're right. It is about the whole child. It is about support. It is about welcoming all of who people are. Here's the thing. The way SEL is practiced right now in our schools, not everybody gets to bring their whole self in. It ain't everybody that's free to be free. Therefore, we're not free, right? Like that's not, like if you're so free that I can't be free, that's called oppression, not freedom. So, when we think about SEL learning, we need to understand that if it is not framed through an anti-racist lens, and if it's not framed through a culturally sustaining lens, then this ineffective. This is SEL learning for some people. And it becomes SEL learning with a slash, really assimilationist work. It's come in and be in these ways, right? Operate and live your life in this way, okay? All right, Rashi, let's go next. So the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning is this big organization that kind of like coined these core social emotional learning competencies. This is available online. You can find all of this online. This is one wheel that I just thought the colors were pretty, so I chose this one, okay? So this wheel breaks down the 5 core competencies that young people should be learning through this social SET teaching, and the way that we as teachers can focus our SEL teaching, okay? So self-management, managing your emotions and your behaviors to get through, to achieve your goals, to get through whatever it is that you're trying to get to. Self-awareness. So one is being aware of how you're feeling and what's happening, and the other one is then knowing how to manage and how to cope, right? So self-awareness is to recognize your emotions and your values, your strengths, your challenges, all that. Responsible decision-making. So in the moment, something's happening, right? How can I make a decision responsibly that positively impacts the collective, the people around me, not just me? All right. And then social awareness. So there's the self, but then there's also like, like that's part of what we call social cues. Like everybody's really down and crying and I'm laughing my butt off. Well, clearly I've misunderstood what the teacher said, right? Or everybody's quiet and working and I think it's time to be swinging off the chair. I'm not picking up on, I'm not having social awareness, right? And then relationship skills, helping young people to, relate to one another, be in relationship safely, productively, and beautifully. We can't do any of this effectively without having, a culturally sustaining approach. So what we're gonna look at, Rashi, is actually ways that race show up in our classroom, and we're gonna make connections to SEL competencies to actually support our students through these ways. All right, I've got a series of, not scenarios, but just ways that all of this stuff shows up, okay? Let's go. We're gonna go one by one. So internalized racism, that shows up in our classrooms. Sometimes that's really hard to deal with. Usually what we're talking about here is students of color who have internalized that white supremacist culture stuff that we talked about earlier, and the things that this society has told them about who they are, that they aren't worthy, that they're not beautiful because they don't have this or that, right? And it's not just general lack of self-esteem, it's very much racialized. That shows up in our classrooms. How can we offer young people tools to deal explicitly with that? Teaching self-awareness. And let me just preface actually before I continue, the whole wheel works together, okay? It doesn't matter where you enter, there isn't a beginning or an end. And even though I'm saying self-awareness, absolutely social self-awareness, absolutely self-management. You can actually use all of them for all of these. I just think that what I'm trying to offer is like a way to start, okay? So to help young people deal with internalized racism, we need to have some self-awareness conversations. Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? What makes you think that you're not beautiful? Or what makes you think that, you are aggressive? Who told you that? Where did you get that from? I know that was something I was told all throughout middle and high school, that I was aggressive, that I had a big mouth, that, somebody was gonna shut me up one day by adults. Today, I understand why they said that. But at the time, I was like, well, I guess I am then. To the point that I know, in college, like there were times where people were like, they would say things and I would say like, yeah, I'm just a bitch. I just am, forgive that word. But I just believed it. I really just thought that was me. And so that's some internalized stuff right there. And then we've got cultural trauma. And this one, this one is hard. This one coupled with cultural mistrust is hard. And I'll get to that one. But cultural trauma is essentially when you've got a whole group of people, and let's think for a minute, let's just think about one group. Let's think about African Americans in this country, okay? As a group, yes, there are individuals, but as a group, they have experienced a horrifying, traumatic experience over and over and continue to. Therefore, there is a cultural trauma experienced by that particular group. That is coming into your classroom. That's been in your classroom. That has been sometimes perpetrated by our classrooms. Then we've got defensiveness, which typically is going to apply to our white students. And I don't even know, I mean, we could probably make the distinction that like the cis hetero white males have the strongest sense of defensiveness, but I'm not gonna lie, I've experienced it just as harshly with some of my white female students. Okay. So I don't know. I guess I'm not ready to say that, but it's possible. I'm not going to refute it. But in my experience, it has been equal. And defensiveness shows up when these conversations, like this very session, right? Some of you might be feeling some of that. And so how do I self-manage, right? Like, how am I going to cope in this moment? How am I going to deal with these feelings that are coming up? And as teachers, we can actually help young people. We have questions that we can ask them, prompts, with tenderness, right? With grace and a spirit of, like, we're going to grow through this together. Okay. And so defensiveness comes up specifically when having conversations about race. Triggers at school that are stemming from current events. I'll tell you right now, y'all, if we had been in school this spring, I mean, whatever, we've been in school when these other murders have happened. But with this George Floyd murder, are you telling me that if any one of our kids of color, particularly the African American or Black ones, really walk into their school and they see that SRO, that's not a trigger? Especially if they don't know him. And an SRO is a police officer in schools, security in schools. And so I'm walking into school and I'm walking through a metal detector and I see this SRO, that could be a trigger. That could easily be a trigger, especially if he's not a member of my community, if he's not a police officer that I know. But that is a reminder that outside the country's burning and that somebody like me got killed, who could have also been my father, right? So we have this trauma that's walking into our schools and these triggers that exist literally within the building. And so how can we support young people? By going over self-awareness and self-management. Oh, okay, you're seeing something that's a trigger. How do you cope in that moment? What can you do? Who do you turn to? Do you squeeze something? Do you drink some water? Like whatever it is, right? But having an awareness ourselves as adults that these are actually racialized triggers and that it's not that, Andre's just real sensitive, okay? And then we come to racist bullying. Bullying in and of itself is a problem in our schools, but we know that racist bullying is also not only a problem, but has gone up since 2016, since He Who Shall Not Be Named was elected. So, racist bullying has really become a big problem, which actually adds to the cultural trauma that a lot of these young people are feeling. And so what ends up happening is that you have, for example, all of or any of your Muslim students who are at your school now coming together to find protection amongst each other because the rest of the school does not seem to care. Doesn't seem to care. So it might look nice that they're all united, but really it's an act of defense to the attacks. And so here we are with racist bullying. How can we help both the victims of this to work on, their self-awareness, right? Like, don't ignore the racist bullying. You got to speak up. You have to alert the adults. But then how do we help those bullies so that they don't continue with this behavior? Because they're not a lost cause. They are themselves a victim of this society. And so how can we help them to develop self-awareness? Like, why are you doing this, Jimmy? Get it together. I'm kidding. And helping Jimmy to have some better relationship skills. How do I interact with these people that maybe at home I'm hearing are terrible terrorists? Like, what do I do in this scenario? And when our classes and our schools aren't dealing with that, we can only expect that Jimmy's going to act that way. Subconscious white supremacist beliefs. I know that I have them. Many of us in this session have had them because we just talked about some of those traits of that culture that we're unaware of by design. Right? And so some of these subconscious beliefs are there, and they're there when a young person tells another person, like, oh my goodness, my work is always perfect. I'm striving for perfection and I'm doing it to make sure that I'm better than everybody else in this class because me, power, power, power. I'm gonna be number one by myself. And so some of that can be harmful to the people around them, but it's for sure harmful to that one individual. Okay? And that requires some social awareness. What is happening in this room? Is that even the culture of this room? Oh, not really. Mistakes are allowed here. So why are you so concerned about perfectionism? Like, let's break that down. Let's do some of that individual work. And then we get to cultural mistrust, which is, I think it's so painful to me. They're all horrible. But this one, I don't know, it hurts me because I know that it is something that I am still working to overcome. So it's personal, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Cultural mistrust is something that actually exists more in the psychology world. And so Dr. Andrea Holman, who actually works here in Austin, is the one that has introduced that to me. And she describes cultural mistrust as actually linked to cultural trauma, right? So you've got this one group, let's say indigenous people, and let's say the Seminoles, okay, just to be even more specific. So the people belonging to the Seminole Nation who collectively have this mistrust of the white people in that particular region due to factual historical experiences. How, instead of us turning to them and us being maybe the rest of the country, hey, Seminoles, just forgive. Oh, I'm having an echo. I don't know if y'all hear it. Do y'all hear it? Yes? Okay, maybe it's over. Okay. Like, hey, Seminoles, why don't y'all just forgive and be nice to those white people? Let's move on. It's 2020. Instead of that, we turn to these other people and say, hey, how have you tried to make amends? How have you tried to restore? And so the way that this can show up in our classroom, this cultural mistrust, is these young people coming into their classroom to this teacher who is a representation of this school and these larger values. And we see that often, particularly in contexts where you have, a majority of students of one ethnic group. So let's say Black and brown and a white teacher. And that white teacher questions, well, why can't I get through? How can I have this relationship? Well, there's cultural mistrust that you're probably not addressing. Even though it wasn't you, you are unfortunately a representation of that for them. The same happens for those of us who are teachers of color in predominantly white spaces. There is a cultural mistrust there. We actually have the same amount of work to do as if we were white in those other contexts. I have experienced this. I have firsthand experience on the work that I had to do to make myself relatable to some of these young people. Okay, so that they could see past their stereotypes, see past the layers of their own whiteness to be like, oh, I see, I can see her now. And so we can walk through that cultural mistrust. And so how do we do that? Self-awareness and relationship skills. That's what's at the core of that too. This was a lot, y'all, but we're getting there. Okay, Rashi. So we're gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna give you the same 3 minutes to pause and reflect. And here are some questions. You're not gonna get through all of these. So this is a moment where you can screenshot. I think it's important for you to get through these. So maybe on your own, maybe this is your homework, I don't know. But right now you can think through some or write through some. I'll read them and then give us 3 minutes, okay? How does your curriculum affirm students' internalized racism? That's a hard question. That is such a hard question. How does your curriculum affirm subconscious white supremacist beliefs? My God. How does your behavior management cause triggers for students of color and or empower white students over others? How does your curriculum address cultural trauma? What are your strategies for dealing with white students' defensiveness? And what strategies do you have to address racist bullying in your classroom? All right, time starts now. All righty. Sorry, y'all. I didn't give you your warning. I got caught up in the chat catching up. Okay. All right, Rashi, keep us going. So, what I want to do now is actually move us into what do we do? And one of the things I saw in the chat was like, this can be so overwhelming and daunting, and it is. And it is. So, let me just say one, I don't think that my call to action to any of you, or even how I operate, is that I'm going in there and I'm bulldozing and taking it all down. That is not sustainable. And that leads to my burnout and also to my firing, which defeats the entire purpose of me coming to work at this school. So now I am not at all encouraging folks either alone, maybe in a group. That's different. If you have a whole, number of staff members who are with, that's a different situation. But I am not saying that you're going to come in and knock it all down, particularly because you're not going to necessarily see all of that in one place. Okay. So I think it's important to spend some time observing at your school. What is the most critical issue right now? What is the top tier emergency level situation that is worth me putting my efforts into? Oftentimes as teachers, we get stuck in just our classroom, and that is important. We for sure have work to do in there, but our classroom is not isolated, even though sometimes we're made to feel that way. We are not isolated, and we do have some power. We have agency at this school. If there's no teachers, guess what? There's no school. So, we have some agency, and it's important for us to, again, kind of go through that process and say, guess what? Even though I need to change the entire, let's say, English department curriculum, right? There's actually something a little bit more prevalent, because we have, let's say, a counselor that a lot of our students are going to, and they're being abused by that counselor. Well, yeah, that's 1A. You'll get to the curriculum in a minute, right? Because we need people to be physically okay in this building. So, that observation time is really important. And so all of that is to say, some resources for you as we move into like, okay, now how does this inform me, and how am I going to walk into my classes, and what my teaching stance is? Okay. 3 books. 1, the culturally sustaining pedagogies that I've been talking about. 2, We Want to Do More Than Survive by Bettina Love, which everybody's hearing. It's all over the place. Which I think is a good thing, because it's normalizing some of those conversations. But I think it's important for people to treat it more than simply like a trophy book that's in their shelf, and actually like dig in and read and embody it. And then Shameless Self Plug is my workbook, but I'm sharing it because, I really don't know of another text that is doing what I'm trying to do there, which is a very practical approach to thinking about the ways that you can be anti-racist, particularly as an English teacher, in the specificity in like the narrow area of reading instruction. So I think that all 3 of those together can be really helpful for you to think about your practices in the classroom, your content area, but also like your actual, like, what does this look like day to day? Okay. So those are 3 right there. You can actually, you can screenshot that if you'd like. But we're going to move into, because I want to make sure to have some Q&A time. So what I want to do next, Rashi, is click into this. This is a thing that I'm loving, that I can share this with you. I believe that you already have this picture that's been emailed to you, so you have it. And if so, if you want to pull it up, you can, but I'm going to walk through it right here anyway. This is something that you can even print and have with you, whatever, however you want to use this. So I'm going to walk you through it, okay? So this is like your anti-racist SEL-informed teaching stance. And I've done a big thing here. I'm just really excited. I keep saying that, but I'm going to talk about it right now. Okay. So each column is, the first 3 are the different frameworks that we've talked about. So in the first column, you have the teaching tolerance domain. So we start there. Then we embed critical race theory. Then we think about the white supremacy culture traits, okay? And then in the 4th column, you're looking at social and emotional learning competencies. And the rows are some of the ways that you can actually blend all this together, okay? So we'll walk through the first one together. So if we're looking at the teaching tolerance domains, right? We're thinking about the first one, let's say identity. And so how does that connect to critical race theory? Well, when you're thinking about and teaching about counter storytelling, that's the moment to have conversations about identity. That is the moment to say, we know that there is this large cultural narrative that, let's say, Chinese kids are all smart and good at math. Well, hey, Chinese kids in this class, and I don't mean to, I'm not saying that you would single them out. I guess I'm just, right, like I'm thinking, helping you think through, like, how can we in this class have a conversation about the diversity actually of Chinese identity? So now we're thinking about Chinese identity and creating counter storytelling, reality and truths. And then we're also dealing with white supremacy culture traits, okay? Why? Because we're addressing some of the things from before, right? So for example, like that is going to bring up some challenging conversations, I'm sure, but you're not having a fear of open conflict. You're embracing the challenge of that, right? And then what SEL learning what SEL competency is this addressing? Self-awareness. It starts to help me, let's say as a Chinese student, okay, who am I, right? Apart from this narrative about me. Like, actually, I don't like math. I really like breakdancing. And so, whatever. So, then I start to develop a self-awareness, and I can start to notice when people actually commit microaggressions against me that are supposed to be flattering because there's this model minority myth about me. But actually, no, I'm going to reject that now, and I'm going to start to be confident about who I am and my identity. That's just row one. Row two. So let's say you want to spend some time teaching about and exploring diversity with your students. We're back to this counter storytelling, but now we're actually thinking about it as in the larger sense. So social awareness, not just the individual, but as a nation, like, wow, we really are very diverse, or whatever route you want to take, okay? We think about justice. And so in terms of justice, when you're looking at critical race theory, well, you're going to be talking about racism that's embedded in the nature of society and racism as a material foundation, because you have to look at the ways that justice, the way that teaching tolerance has set up this domain, you have to look at the way that justice exists in the structures of the United States. And clearly, you're going to be addressing and dismantling white supremacy culture traits. And so you're going to be teaching the SEL competency of social awareness to understand what's happening in society, okay? And then, let's say that it's time to action. It's time to help young people to actually think through, like one of the things I've talked about before and discussed is how young people, particularly in elementary and middle school, are perfect candidates for all people are, but I'm just going to hone in on them for a second. They're perfect candidates for these conversations because they are so about fairness. If you don't give them that same orange piece of paper that Sally got, they're going to be like, this not fair. I want that piece of paper. She got a bigger piece than me, like my 2 and 5 year old. Why does Zion get grapes and I didn't? And so it's important to be like, you're right, this is unfair. What can we do about that? What action do you want to take, right? And so in doing that, you're actually practicing critical race theory by showing them that racism changes and develops over time, and you still have to be active, and we still got to protest, okay? That it's not over. In doing so, you're dismantling white supremacy culture traits, and you're teaching them SEL competencies of self-management and responsible decision-making. Self-management in, man, I'm so angry, I'm so upset and disheartened by this reality, but actually I'm gonna do something about it. I'm gonna take those emotions, that frustration and that anger, and I'm gonna channel it into this project with my class, okay? And we're gonna think through, we're gonna make some important decisions. Do we wanna make these signs and march in the hallway? Okay, well, what can happen? Oh, well, the principal might get mad. Well, do we still want to make this decision, right? So you're walking them through the process of understanding consequences for their actions, understanding what it is that they're like, hello, we have adults that don't know how to do that, y'all, okay? And I know that we all know this. So, doing this work with young people is doable, it's manageable, it's achievable, and it yields such better results later. We know this as educators, right? We know that the better equipped they are as young ones, the better it's going to be when they're like in high school, right? So your stance, our stance, my stance, can be worded in this way at the bottom, and that's what I've created for us. So to teach in a way that leads to positive social transformation, remember that phrase from CSP, I'm going to link CRT, critical race theory, to the teaching tolerance domains and dismantle white supremacy culture. This is going to lead to anti-racist social emotional learning for my students. And then, like Pinky and the Brain, we're going to change the world. Do you see that? See how we did that? See how we just changed the world? Now, of course, this is very idealistic, and we're going to fall on our face along the way. We're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes. And then we come back to our students and say, oh, y'all, that didn't work. Let's try this again. Or, what should we do better next time, right? That's okay. This has taken me a very long time, y'all. This is not a thing that I woke up one morning and was like, here it is. I know it now. No. This has taken me a very long time to integrate all these things, to put them into practice, particularly in some of the most uncomfortable spaces where I've taught, okay? Whether it was like super restricted and oppressive and they're telling me like even what objectives to put on the board, or in a place where like I might be the only person of color in my classroom. I am the only one, right? And I'm trying to do some of this work. So this can be done, and it has to be tailored to your context, who you are in that space. Where is that space? I would have never taught in the school that I taught at in Austin if I were anywhere else in Texas, like literally anywhere else. But I would do this work here at this school. It would look different if I was in East Texas or West Texas or El Paso. It would just look different because of my context, okay? So this is a place, or not a place, sorry, this is a tool for you to adapt to your work, for you to walk through. This is not something that you're gonna print and hang up and be like, that's it, check, I did it, I got it. That's just not how this is gonna work. You've got to figure out how it meets your needs as an individual in that place. What can you do? And how does it meet the needs of your young people? If you're working at a place that is predominantly students of color, well, your work there is going to be different. You might spend way more time dealing with, for example, internalized racism than anything else. Like that might be your biggest tackle. If you are, whatever. So I won't go through all the scenarios, but I hope it's clear that I am not offering you a one-size-fits-all solution. I'm trying to offer us tools to develop our approaches so that they are sound, anti-racist, and culturally sustaining, okay? Sherry, I can't remember what's next, girl. What's next? Oh, okay. Well, we can go back. We'll wrap it up in a little bit. I'll take a little bit of time. I don't know, Daisy, how you want to do Q&A. Do people unmute and ask questions, or do they submit it in the chat?
Yeah, if you can submit it in the chat box, we'll collect them for the very end.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I figured we could do some Q&A now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know that I've seen some, but I didn't catch all of them. So I don't know if there's anything now that somebody wants to ask. I don't know if people did.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Debbie. I signed up for this workshop. I'm not actually an educator. I am in grad school right now on an occupational therapy program. Mm-hmm. And I'm organizing with a bunch of my other classmates to try to make our program as anti-racist as possible, which is why I signed up for this workshop. So first of all, thank you for everything you shared. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering from your perspective, how myself as a student can hold my teachers and professors accountable and my department accountable to, they're like, we support you and we support
right.
Right now, it just feels like talk.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing to know and understand is that you do have power, okay? You have it. And I'm not simply trying to encourage you. Like, this is factual, right? So you have power within your institution, and you need to figure out exactly what's the best way to use that power. That might mean having individual conversations with teachers about their approach to things. Why, and often I stole my husband's phrase, which is like lead with curiosity. So often I'll say, ask the question like, oh, Professor Jones, this was an interesting choice. Can you help me understand why you chose this? And start with questions. Oh, well, did you consider this or that? You know, in a way that you know, isn't necessarily off-putting, but it is kind of, you are holding them accountable, right? Because the goal is not to call them out to the point where they're non-functional. We want to call them in so that we can actually get some change. The goal is change. So what are we going to do to get to change, right? So I guess it really does depend on what issues you want to tackle. But that's also why I said earlier, like, it's so critical to identify problems, right? So what are some of the problems here at this institution, at this school, in this classroom? Which one are like emergency level 1 and which ones are emergency level 2? And then identifying your allies. Who are the other students that are willing to sit with you? And maybe it's not one-on-one, but a group conversation with that professor. Or y'all sit in each other's classes and ask questions, because then you're not at risk of failing because that's not your class, right? So you want to think strategically and use your power, the one that you have, right? If there are no students, there's no school. Teachers can't teach nobody. So I think the only people that are dispensable are the administrators, because we can run a school, right? Teachers and students can run it. But, you know, you need at least teachers and students to have a school, to have some learning. So, you know, as students, you all can really, you can raise hell. You can do a lot. We've seen that a lot of college campuses have changed particular, like, really important policies and some of their approaches because of student protests and demands. So, you know, I don't know, I could say a whole lot, but I'll stop there. I know there's other questions too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Hi, I have another question. Thank you so much for the content, but also just the delivery. I love seeing educators who are teaching other educators and being inviting and just super engaging. My specific question is, do you have any suggestions on how you approach your workbook when doing outdoor environmental education? So the work that I do, it's usually like a two-touch program. So like we see the students twice and we go to active restoration sites. So that's my question. How do we do it through an environmental education lens, even though they seem to be very complementary already?
I mean, I think, I don't know that the workbook will speak directly to that. It's very much about reading instruction. It's very much for English teachers or anybody doing reading intervention, you know, elementary through, I mean, even college professors are using it. But I think that there are certainly concepts in there that can cross-reference, right? And I think maybe this session is going to speak more to physical activity and outdoor activity, just because you're you know, engaging with young people in these settings where they have to be active and use their bodies. So how comfortable are you with your body? How does body show up as a conversation, you know, an underlying conversation when you're doing these activities? Like, I'm thinking too of PE, right? Who gets picked last? Who gets picked first? What are the activities that you're doing? Do they favor stronger, able students? You know what I mean? So I think developing that type of critical lens for that physical work is critical, and so or important. So I think maybe the you know, like the SEL approach might be more beneficial. Anyway, I'm going to be sharing, and we can do that now. Actually, we can drop the link in there now in the chat for so Dr. Bettina Love has started the Abolitionist Teacher Network. I don't know how many of you have seen that. It literally just came out like 24 hours ago, I think yesterday or the day before. And so it's a brand new like guide, downloadable for free. The link should be there. It is. And that I think your name is Alba. Okay. And that I think, Alba, is that can offer you a really good lens. It's got some, I think what I like the most is a series of questions that it offers. Questions for you to post to administrators, for self, and for developing your content. And it's got some values in there too, so that can inform your stance in that type of like non-traditional classroom space. So I think I would guide you there, and it's free, downloadable. So that should, you know, I think that can be more helpful maybe than the workbook for that particular stuff.
Thank you so much, Lorena.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I see a question here. Questions about family engagement on the SEL anti-racist approach. Oh, I see. How do you prepare families of elementary students? Okay. Well, I think one thing to consider, so two things. One, there's always the argument that, oh, but they're so young and innocent and, should they be talking about this? And we know that that's, BS. So I want to hold that for a second so I don't forget the other one, which is that it depends on who these families are, right? So let's say that you're a whatever educator you are, even if you're an educator of color, parents of color might see you as part of this system too, right? Especially if you haven't built a relationship just yet, especially if it's the beginning of the year, you are not free of any judgment yet until I see what you bout. If you bout it, then we'll know, right? And so those first interactions really matter. So there could be cultural mistrust there happening with these families and the teacher. So that's something to approach and thinking about, okay, well, how do I present myself in a way that I can honor that cultural mistrust by respecting it, but showing that, I can actually be trusted, and then being trustworthy. Because we don't want them to simply trust us so that we feel better. But what that might mean is advocacy in really uncomfortable ways, and going to your administrators and saying, hey, this family does not appreciate ABC. Or guess what? You say you're welcoming all families, but nothing is bilingual. And this whole community is Vietnamese. Like, what are you doing? Guess what? You're not actually welcome, right? So there's that piece for teachers to think about. That's usually what we're talking about when there's a lack of parental engagement, is that there's cultural mistrust here. Okay. But anyway, going back to the other issue of like, how do we approach this with elementary students? Well, just like you would with any other student, you have to offer context, you have to build rapport, and you just like, I don't even know how to say it. Like you just do it. You just get into it, right? You don't have to tell them you're teaching philosophy. The posters on the wall don't matter if they don't mean anything. You just start. And you start with conversations. Hey, y'all, I noticed over the weekend that there was a lot of protests in our town. What's going on? Oh, I don't know. Well, this one or that one. And it's just organic, right? Like just be with them. So I don't know. Maybe that wasn't the question, but that's the way I went. How do we do this virtually? Yeah, that's real. So do I have a curriculum or books for K-2? So actually, I'll come back to that. Virtually is going to be very difficult, but it can be done. There are people who have been doing CSP through online instruction for a number of years. I think what's hardest is our notion that these relationships are only built in person, right? That's our comfort level. That's what we've done. That's my comfort level. I do not like online instruction. That's the truth. Because of this very thing that I'm identifying, right? I feel like I've got to be in person. They got to see my body and my hands when I'm talking, and then they're going to love me, and then it's going to work out, right? So, that part is really hard, but I think that we can still build community. Like if right now, for example, we broke up into breakout groups and I gave every small group a question, I think we would all be able to have conversations. There will still clearly be a little bit of a filter and a barrier because we don't know each other and this is our first time meeting. But if this was our 10th session together, we will have built community. And so just like in person, it'll take some time, might take a little longer, but you can absolutely get there. I wouldn't start with these topics with a brand new class that you just have. But there are ways to show them who you are and what you're about. And that might be, for example, prefacing the curriculum for the year, showing like, hey, between now and May, we're gonna listen to all of these voices that are people of color and queer people and all the different identities, right? Or, oh, you know what? These are the values of our class. What values do you want to add to this? How can we co-construct our community guidelines? All of those things, which you do in person, you do virtually. Same messaging, that you are welcome, that this is our space, right? So, I don't want us to get stuck with the horror. I'm biased. That is online learning. It's not horrible. I just, kind of hate it. But I just don't want us to get stuck there, because in the end, there's just too much work to do. We just can't. We can't. We have to press on. It's going to be uncomfortable regardless, So I'll stop there. And then some fun news. We actually are working on a curriculum that is book centered for pre-K and kindergarten. So it's not beyond, sorry y'all. But it's to help us, including myself, parents who are, keeping our babies home this school year. Like, what are we going to do with them? How do I teach a child that is potty training about letters? Who knows? So we're learning. But we have created a curriculum to help ourselves, and we're just going to share it and make it available to parents as well. And I know teachers can most certainly use it. So stay tuned for that. And you know what, Daisy, Sherry, we can go back. Rashi, we can go back to the PowerPoint so that folks can figure out, like, this is how to follow. There you go. So you can follow me on Twitter, but also you can follow Multicultural Classroom on Instagram and Facebook. Pay attention to no O's. So Multicultural Class and then RM. You can follow us there because that's where you'll have access to all of that stuff. You can visit our website, sign up for free updates. There's also a free membership. It's called like free resources. And so we're continuing to just add and load and all kinds of things for y'all there. All of this is to say that you'll have access to our curriculum there too. But most importantly, I want to say thank you for joining today, for being interested in this work, for wanting to do this. That's like a pretty legit first step, that you were even open enough to saying, I want to know more about the intersection of these things, of anti-racist pedagogy and SEL. That's a really important first step. And just from the chat, it seems like so many people were really engaged and willing to wrap their minds around all of this. I think I'm supposed to pass it off to Rashi now. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. This is me, right? This is me. Okay. Another call to action. We got several. So this book. So Daisy and I actually co-edited and published this book, Speaking for Ourselves. And I think that it actually can be a really good tool for these SEL conversations. So it's an anthology of all types of writing, multimedia, across age ranges. We've got young people, like my 18-month-old, her artwork is in here, all the way through elders who are talking to us, and it spans all types of areas of life. And there are journal and writing prompts in there. So you can surely use it in the classroom, but this is also just for personal, like whatever. But I think that it's also a good starting point too, to think about ways to have conversations and have texts that speak to just like real life issues, right? Like the condition of being a human being. So that's something to consider if you're interested in purchasing that book. Okay, now I'm really giving it to Rashi. Go. I'll mute.
Thank you so much, Lorena. That was an amazing 90 minutes with you. Thank you for being so generous with the labor that you have had and done to really pull together all of these different pieces, the creation of helping kind of actualize some of this into our work. So thank you for not only sharing your wealth and wisdom with us, but also, so generously responding to our questions and helping us really like live this work. So thank you. And then, yes, we have a couple more calls to action. We want to, you've probably heard us talk about this already. We have at Embracing Equity a leadership residency. So if you're a school leader that, where this session has really kind of inspired you to think more deeply about how to incorporate anti-bias, anti-racist work into your school, how to integrate social emotional learning into your school, join our leadership residency. Sharon will put in the chat box the application link for it. If you're a leader who's striving to start a new school, this could also be something that's really good for you. Our current cohort has a few people who are in the early stages of trying to start their own school. So that's also an opportunity to kind of think together and freedom dream together with other leaders for your school. I also wanted to note again, we have 3 cohorts that again are meant to be virtual spaces. So these have been intentionally designed. I know there were some questions in the chat box around how do you do some of this work virtually. These are 3 cohorts that are specifically designed from the get-go to be virtual spaces. We have the Embracing Identity cohort for intentionally racially diverse folks. We have the Embracing Identity cohort for white anti-racist identity development, and then the Embracing Disruption cohort for systemic change. Again, encourage you to sign up in the wait list that Sharon has posted also in the chat box. We are currently sold out of them, but we are hoping to launch a few more very soon. So if you sign up for the wait list, we will make sure to ping you first and email you first and let you know when new cohorts open up. So please do that. Also, stay connected with us on social media. Some of you probably already follow us on Instagram, but we also have Facebook and Twitter at the same handle of @EmbracingEquity. So follow us on all 3 if you don't already do so. And we have a very specific call to action for you throughout really this virtual convening, but especially after today's session. This was such an amazing session, and we would love to hear what you learned from it, what you took away from it, how you're planning on implementing some of what you heard today into your daily practice. So please go ahead and post it on your social media and then tag us at Embracing Equity. We want to not only learn and hear from what you're doing, but we also want to be really amplifying your voice and your work. So if you tag us, we can reshare and repost and the like. And then last, but definitely not the least, again, feedback is super, super important to us. We really consider it a gift. You probably heard me say this in almost every session so far. And you probably maybe even felt some of the changes that we made based on your feedback over the course of this conference. So again, Sharon has put in the chat box the link to this very quick 2-question feedback form. If you could take a minute right now, I will actually put a timer on and give everybody a minute to do this. We really appreciate your voice and helping us design this event and this experience to make it as meaningful as possible. So please go ahead and just take a minute right now and complete the feedback form that is in the chat. Great. So hopefully that, I don't know if you heard my bell chime, but I think that was a minute. If you needed a few additional minutes, you can feel free to continue to provide us with your feedback afterwards. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Lorena to close us out.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up on this chat. I'm not going to be able to. So I'm seeing so many good questions. Please reach out on social media, and I will most certainly engage there. Okay, but let's wrap up with some breathing again, because this was a lot, y'all. This was heavy. I told y'all it was going to be heavy. Plus, I've been sitting here with this big old belly, so I need to like breathe. So breathe with me, okay? So we're just gonna do our same 3 breaths. We're gonna take a deep breath, hold it for a moment, and then exhale on a 3 count, kind of slowly, okay? So I'll guide us through that. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And you see I drop my shoulders with that, okay? So let those breaths like do just the whole body. And then rub your baby if you have a baby too, okay? I used to make my students do that. All right, one more deep breath. And exhale. 1, 2, 3. All right, last one. 1, 2, 3. All right, y'all. Thanks for being with me so much. Thank you for all of that. Ken, you go ahead and rub that baby cheeseburger, okay? Thanks for coming. Y'all, thank you so much. Arashi, I think there's one more, right? I'm passing it back to you, or no, we're good. Okay,
We're
thank you
good.
for coming. You are dismissed, as they say. But thank you. Thanks for being with me here. Reach out on social media. Reach out.
Thank you, Lorena.
Yes.
Thank you.